Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Parenting is Easy, said no one ever. I am your host, Hanani Abraham, and today I have a very fun and interesting guest, and her name is Katherine, and she is the proud mother of three children, and she has raised them by herself. And I'm going to let her introduce a little bit about herself and let us know a little bit about what her life has been like, and we'll get right into our conversation. So, Katherine, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, I apologize that my dogs are barking. They never bark. And of course, now they start. Um, Hopefully, this will stop in just a second. But I have been a single mom of three kids for the last 30 years. I raised them completely on my own with no child support, no help.
Wow.
My husband decided he was gay, and then I found out he was molesting my kids. So that was the end of that.
Hmm.
So ever since then, I did it completely on my own. Two of my kids, my oldest and my youngest, have mental illness. My oldest was diagnosed with ADHD and bipolar when he was 3, and because of subsequent drug use, was also diagnosed with schizophrenia. And my youngest was diagnosed with borderline personality, and we think that she also has some bipolar traits, and she has ADHD. So it was really chaotic around my house for
Wow.
many years. My middle son was never diagnosed with anything, never saw any mental illness traits in him. But it was a wild ride around my house for a good 20 years.
Wow.
I since then they've all grown up and moved out, and I've opened my own business, and thanks to my daughter's help. And now I am living my life with my two little dogs and putting out fires when they call me and need me to put out fires. It doesn't end when they move out.
Oh no! Oh no! I'm happy you said that because I do want to get to that. There's so much to unpack, Katherine, with everything you just said. How old are your kids now?
My kids now are 30, which we never thought my oldest son would make it to 30, but he did. He's 30,
Wow,
27, and my daughter's 23.
amazing, amazing. So yeah, you mentioned you're starting a business with through the help of your daughter. What's that been like? Tell us a little bit about the business, and also how has your relationship with your daughter been impacted by opening a business with her assistance?
Well, I'll tell you, it's not really with her assistance. It's I was a mixed media artist for about 25 years, and that allowed me to stay home with my kids. And at the beginning of the pandemic, my daughter called me in tears. Mom, I lost my job because of the pandemic. Pandemic, what am I going to do? And I said, you know what? Come on over and let's make soap. I need to get rid of this soap equipment in my kitchen, and I'd like to get my kitchen back. And she said, okay. And I said, we'll figure out what you're going to do. No, don't worry. So she came over and we made soap for 4 or 5 days, and we had the best time. We had
Hmm.
such a good time together. It was real bonding time. The problem was we made so much soap, we ran out of people to give it to. We gave it to neighbors and family and friends, and we had no one else to give more soap to.
So it sounds like a lot of it was more taking her mind off of what she was going through, and you being mom, and that's how you were able to start this business.
That was the original idea, because she
Okay.
said, Mom, we're having such a good time, let's turn this into a business. And I said, Rebecca, that's a great idea. I would love nothing more than to work with you. So she went home to tie up some loose ends, and I got busy incorporating the business and making business cards and everything you need to do to start a new business. And keep in mind, I had never started a new business before. I knew nothing about small business ownership at all. And neither did she at 19. She knew nothing either. And she came back, I think it was 3.5 days later, and said, Mom, I chickened out. I got a job. And I said, you did what? Are you kidding me? Here I've spent all this money getting us ready to start this business, and you got a job? So
Wow.
I came to a fork where was I going to just flush all this money that I started this new business with and go back to being a mixed media artist? Or was I going to go forward and keep this business going? And she said, don't worry, Mom. If you do the business, I'll help you. We'll keep making soap together, but I've got to work full time to make my car payment and my this and that and the other. And I said, okay, as long as you'll help me. The child has not made a bar of soap since opening the business.
So I want to take that example of how you've been using your relationship with your daughter to do certain things for yourself, and curious what was it like having two kids with mental health issues that you've had to work constantly with. And I'm sure it wasn't just on yourself, with yourself and with them, but there are other people involved in their care and mental health professionals or other health practitioners. What was that like, and what type of burden did that take on you?
It was a huge burden. And, that's why my business fits in so well to what I do now, because we were constantly at therapy appointments. We did family therapy appointments. I would listen to the therapists, and then my mother and the school would call social services on me because they were saying that I was being neglectful when all I was doing was following what the therapists had told me. For example, my son refused to wear, we live in Denver, and my son would refuse to wear a coat when it was snowing. And the therapist said, natural consequences, don't fight him about wearing the coat. That ruins everyone's morning. Let him go to school without a coat, and he'll realize he needs to wear a coat the next time it snows. Well, I would send him to school without a coat, and the school would call social services on me and say that I was neglecting my son. So there was a real push and pull going on with all of these people who thought that they were being helpful, but really were just kind of extra chefs in the kitchen that didn't need
Oh yeah.
to help us.
Wow. So,
So
what was that like? Just having, obviously any kitchen that has too many chefs doesn't produce the best food. So, and there you are trying to do so many things for all three of your kids at the same time. What was that like, having so many people putting their opinions, their ideas, their power, and really impeding on your job and your love of taking care of your kids?
it was really difficult because then as a parent, we all know that kids don't come with instructions. I had no idea what I was doing. And I had no idea, even worse, about how to raise kids with mental illness.
Right.
And so I would try to listen to the therapists, and then everybody at the school would tell me that I was doing something wrong and that I wasn't living up to what I needed to do. And then I would try to listen to the people at the school, and then I would catch it from the therapists. So I felt like I was in this constant battle between the therapy people and the school people. And then I have my mother in the mix telling me that no matter what I do, it's all wrong.
She's doing mom
So
things, right?
yes, she is. So I didn't know what to do. And finally I decided I'm just going to listen to the therapy people. And because we were there for at least 1 hour per kid a week. Plus we were there for another probably hour and a half for family therapy a week. And that didn't count when we would go through psych hospitalizations and the extra therapy that you get when those come up.
All right.
So we had a lot
So you're
of therapy.
talking about an average, it sounds like over here, of over 4 hours of therapy a week, at least.
Per week. Yes. And that's not even counting too what the kids were getting, because of course the school, all of my kids had an IEP. Well, my 2 kids had an IEP. And that would count, plus they had the school psychologist weighing in on things. So the kids had another hour of psychology at school. Wow. So the kids were therapied out. Wow. They got a lot of therapy.
And is it fair to say that mom was therapied out also?
Mom was very therapied out.
But at the same time, this is also therapy for other people. What were you doing for yourself, and how were you getting through all this?
Well, and that's just it, is that I was hanging on by a fingernail. I didn't know. It was horrible. And my kids would do these things, especially my oldest son, would do these things that were completely out of left field that I had no idea how to deal with, and I would talk to other parents.
Can you give me an example of something?
He would go to school and tell the other kids that I was a drug dealer and that I was making him sell drugs for me, and that because he wouldn't sell my drugs, I stabbed him in the leg. That was one thing that we went through.
Wow.
And social services, of course, gets involved because they want to see if he has a wound on his leg. And I'm talking to other parents, and other parents are like, we've never had that problem with our Sally. And I'm like, well, I'm having this problem constantly. Or even when he was little, going back to when he was just toddler. People would say, put him in timeout and just leave him there for a little while. And he would climb the fence. He'd climb he'd open the door. People would tell me to put a lock on the outside of the door so he couldn't open it. Didn't matter. He'd pull the door off. It was just so far, so extreme compared to what other parents seemed to be going through that I couldn't relate to what other parents were talking about. They were talking about Johnny missing a goal in their soccer game. And I was like, we can't even play soccer because my kid can't function long enough. He would go off on all the other teammates on the soccer team. So we couldn't even play soccer.
So what was it like for mom? What was it like for Katherine to be going through all this and just seeing her kids having this constant care from other people, and also the constant struggles and the things that you're dealing with at home? What was happening to Katherine during this time?
I would truly hanging on by a thread, and it's heartbreaking to see someone you love so much going through these things, but it's also at the same time heartbreaking that someone else, because they have an MSW behind their name or because they have a PhD behind their name, they're supposed to be able to fix your child when you can't. And it's hard to accept that someone else has the tools to fix whatever's going on, knowing that you can't, and you're the one that loves the kiddo the most.
Yeah. Well, I think, and to your point, and at least from the way I'm hearing it from you, it's that love that kept that piece of fingernail attached.
It is.
And I'll allow that connection. And I don't think there's any letters in the alphabet before anybody's name or after anyone's name that can give a fraction of what that fingernail gave. And I think it goes to show that maybe there are people or situations or things or medications that can help a parent. Or should I use the word assist a parent when it comes to what their job is as a parent and what their responsibility is? But no one can do the job of a mom. No one could do the job of a parent that is there and loving and putting so much into that. It's probably the most powerful tool or drug out there when it comes to us as parent. And the way I like talking about it is, I like trying to teach how we can like our kids as much as we love them. But I don't think that love ever goes away. Sometimes the liking could be a little bit hard, but we want to be able to work on taking that love and just exploiting the hell out of it and putting it onto our kids constantly. Now, that's not everything. I don't think love is everything when it comes to us as parents. And there's going to be a struggle always, whether it's looking for the shoe, beating up the kid on the soccer field, or missing a therapy session, whatever it is. There's always going to be situations that are going to frustrate us. But I think as long as we are able to focus and find those things that we're able to hold on to, and we're able to bring in with and to ourselves regarding our relationship to our children, that's what holds us together. So I'm curious to hear from you. What was it like, and how were you able to take care of yourself through all this, and how were you able to actually manage as you as a person, more than just as mom, but as a person for yourself?
I didn't. My whole heart, my whole being, my whole everything went into my kids. If it wasn't about my kids, it didn't exist, because I already felt bad because dad wasn't in the picture. I already felt bad because we couldn't financially compete with the very affluent neighborhood that we live in. I already felt bad about all these things. I already felt bad that they had mental illness. I blamed myself for all of these things. And that's why it's so interesting that I had this light bulb moment, and it didn't happen until after I started my company. It has become...
And your kids are already adults at this point.
My kids are already adults. I went on a date because my oldest son would not allow me to date at all. He would make sure that he ruined whatever relationship I was trying to start. He would get in the middle of and ruin it. Just flat out of the gate, would not allow me to date. And
Wow.
and that sounds so backwards, because he shouldn't have had that choice, but he was so persistent, I'll say, in his ways, that it was impossible for me to date. And I finally went on a date when they were all grown and gone. And the guy asked me, "What do you like to do?" And, I could have told him for hours what my kids like to do and everything that they like to do, but I had no idea what I like to do. No idea, because I
Mm.
didn't have time for that for 20 years.
Mm. You were too distracted by all the responsibilities that you had to take care of yourself.
Exactly, because it is a lot. It's a double time job taking care of two kids with mental illness. It really is. And I had no partner to bounce things off of. It was
Right.
I had no one.
Right. You were on call like more often than a 7-Eleven has to be open.
You're so right. You're so right. Because we did do the night terrors. We did do the bedwetting. And I'm talking about bedwetting at like 12 years old. We did all of
Mm.
that stuff. And it didn't dawn on me until that conversation with that man and a little afterward that my company is so important to me, because it teaches you that self-care is so important. And had I practiced some self-care when my kids were growing up, maybe I would have had a clue about who I was, and maybe I would have been a better parent, because I wouldn't have been so tunneled in on what everything that they needed. And I would have been a separate person in addition to being Evan, Alex, and Becca's mom. I would have been Katherine. And what a concept. But that never dawned on me the entire time they were growing up. It took all of my energy and all of my focus to get what they needed and do what the therapists were recommending. And then we turn around and the art therapist would recommend something else. And we turn around and this therapist would recommend. So I was just trying to constantly institute what therapists wanted us to do, and I don't want to say that my kids' lives were totally full of therapy, because they still played, they still did all of that stuff. But there was a lot of therapy going on, and mom was really trying to enforce what the therapists wanted done.
Right.
Even though we would go back to therapy the next week and nothing had changed.
Wow.
So it was really hard.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And I'm curious to hear a little bit about, so your middle child, your second son.
Alex.
Alex. He's experiencing everything going on, and he's a part of this picture. How is your relationship with him affected, knowing that there are other kids that probably need a little more, well, more than just TLC, but they need more attention regarding everything that they need? And how is Alex affected by it? And as a parent that has a child that doesn't have those mental health stumbling blocks along the way, and they get to see this and witness this, but they also see mom using so much of her energy and time with them. How is your relationship with him affected? And how can a parent go about working with a child that doesn't have certain deficiencies or extra curricular stuff that he has to take care of? How does a parent go about taking care of that relationship when they have other ones that are in a way more taxing on them?
I really wish that I would have put some time aside to deal with just Alex and have Mother Alex days, because Alex and my daughter too didn't exhibit mental health problems until she was close to a teenager. Nothing really kind of blossomed in that area for her until she was older. Evan came out that way. Evan was, he was diagnosed at 3.
Right.
Alex, the younger two really had a problem because they were coming up after Evan, and we've lived in the same place now I've lived in the same place for 27 years now. So they all went to the same elementary, same middle, and same high schools. And they all had to fight off the reputation that Evan had already put out there. Everybody knew who Evan was because of the things that he did. And Alex had a really hard time.
They're sort of living in his shadow.
Yes. And they had to prove that they weren't like Evan. And, other kids would tell their younger siblings about Evan, and they had a hard time making friends, because who wants to be friends with people like Evan? And so it was really hard for Alex to break through and show that he wasn't like that. And
His brother.
Yeah. And both of them got really lost in translation, kind of, because as they got older and as Rebecca started showing signs of mental illness, that's when Evan developed a heroin problem and was in and out of jail. And I was constantly using our money to bail him out, or he was stealing our family money and we wouldn't have money for groceries. And
Hmm.
Alex and Becca had to live with that. And I will tell you that Alex has made a decision as an adult about 6 months ago. He has cut his whole family off. He doesn't speak to any of us. I have my ideas why, but he does struggle with some PTSD, and he has just made the decision that he doesn't want to talk to any of us. And I have to
Hmm.
respect that from him. I know that growing up was not ideal for him. I'm sure that
Hmm.
he was tired of being drugged from, therapy to the jail to having to go visit Evan in prison to, I'm sure that he got sick of it. And I'm sure that that
Yeah.
played a big part in why he quit talking to all of us. But I can't.
So what's it like for you talking about that now and knowing where your son is? What's coming up for you now?
It's really hard. Alex, I probably shouldn't say this, but Alex is one of my favorite people in the whole universe. He is such a great person. He's just such a neat person to know. He's so smart and just so caring and just has so many interests. And he's so responsible. He's such a great person to know. And it really breaks my heart that he has chosen not to speak to any of us for the time being. And I
Yeah.
hope that that changes, because as he became an
Yeah.
adult, he and I became very close. And he would stop by between his two jobs. He would come by and talk to me for an hour or two as he went from job to job, just the two of us, or he'd bring me lunch, or just, we would have these just kind of covert meetings that I really enjoyed that we don't get to have now that he's kind of
Yeah.
MIA.
Yeah. Well, if there was something that you would like to tell him right now, and maybe one day he hears this, what would you like to tell him?
Oh, I would tell him that he is my whole heart. I know, looking back, I know what he went through, and I understand how unfair it seemed and how it seemed like my attention was always wrapped up in Evan or Becca. I get that it's hard enough to have siblings who have all of these issues, but it's even worse when it feels like mom is stuck to those issues and not giving anything to you. And I can see that now that there's been some time and some space between when it happened or when it was going on and now. And I would just tell him that he is truly my whole heart, and I would do anything to make it up to him. Anything.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I want to go back over here to something you were saying before regarding your daughter, and things didn't show until she was a teenager. Can you talk a little bit about that time and what it was like within the family dynamics, and more importantly for you, what was going on inside?
It was really hard as she became an adolescent, because apparently she had been watching TikTok videos and really gotten into watching some online stuff that really kind of warped her mind. She came down with an eating disorder and became a huge proponent of I can't even think of what it's called now, but when you're for anorexia, there's a term for it. And she was really pro Anna, I think is what it's called, maybe. And she became very active on those websites. And I had no idea at the time. I just thought she was watching, she was really into dance and ballet and gymnastics. And I thought she was watching videos about that kind of stuff. Little did I
Right.
know, she started having self image issues because she was so interested in those things. And she started thinking she was fat. And so she developed an eating disorder. And that took us a long time to get under control. And that
How old
morphed.
how old was she at this time?
It started when she was about 9. And I think we noticed when she was about 12. To me,
Okay.
she was just a normal kid. But I guess she wasn't. I would feed her and she wouldn't eat her food, she says. And she was a thin kid. She was a thin kid, but I was a thin kid growing up. So I never put two and two together. Um, and she had a lot of health issues. She has asthma, and that caused
Mm.
a problem. She was on prednisone a lot, and that caused some physical changes in her. But I guess
Right.
the kids at school would make fun of her, and that kind of drug her deeper into not fitting in at school, but not fitting in at home either. So where did she fit in? And hearing stories now of the things that the boys did to her when I wasn't home, I had no idea that any of this was going on. And it makes me feel
Are we talking like abuse?
just brother, sister. Rebecca takes it as
Okay.
abusive, but she sees it much differently. I see it as brother and sister kind of shenanigans. The boys were
Right.
older, and of course they picked on their little sister. But if anybody else picked on their little sister, you better watch out because the boys were going to come after you. It was that kind of
Right.
thing.
So from their point of view, they were doing brotherly love, but from her point of view, that's not what she felt.
Exactly. And she claims to this
Mm.
day that it was totally unfair and that she had a horrible childhood and that I was inaccessible to her. And it's funny that she says that to me because due to the size of our house, she and I shared a bed until she was 12. So to me, it seems like she was always homesick or we were always doing something together. But to her, it feels like I was always focusing on Evan or trying to do something with Alex.
Mm.
So we all have very different, we all remember things very, very differently.
Well, hearing your kids, and obviously it sounds like you've had conversations with them regarding their upbringing and the impact of their lives on each other and on the whole family dynamics. Are there certain things that you can say now through the self-care, which I want to get back to a little bit more, but through, I guess, the contemplation and the thinking about and processing things that have happened throughout the past 2 decades, 3 decades, are the things that you can say now, you know what, I wish this is something I would have incorporated, implemented, or worked on, or been more involved with when it came to your kids?
Yes, I would have listened to myself more.
Mm.
I
Can
would
you
have,
can you expand on that a little bit, please?
everybody has that little voice, that little intuition inside of them. And I wish that I would have put my faith in the therapists and the psychiatrists and the people that we were dealing with. But I also wish that I would have given myself a little bit more credit because I wasn't dumb. I wasn't true. I had no idea what raising kids was like. I was learning as they were learning, but I had a pretty good head on my shoulders about what they needed and what was good for them. And I wish that I would have done a little bit less relying on everybody else because it was just
Mm.
knocking me all over the place, and a little bit more relying on myself and what do my kids need, what do I know that my kids need, rather than yeah,
What do they need?
they need a lot of love and a lot of support, and they need a
They
friend.
need mom.
Right, that's just it. They need you to be there, and it doesn't take a lot to be there. They need you to support them in what they do, and they need a friend. And I'm not talking about friends like you're out buying them alcohol and that kind of friend. I'm talking about they need a friend to feel like there's a soft place to land, like they have somebody they can go to no matter what. And that's what I've
Mm.
always wanted my kids to feel like. But because we did so much therapy, I was farming that all out to everyone else
Mm.
when it should have
Okay.
been.
So I'm hearing you say that there obviously is a very big and important place to therapy and to going to people that have those letters before and after their name, and to also know who's the head of the household. To let
Exactly.
to let your children know that, hey, we're going to other people for help, but we have to work on things ourselves. There's a family dynamic, and there's the ingredient of love that no one else can give more than we can give each other, and then and me as mom can go ahead and give you.
Exactly. And, our family was unique. Our family, just because the therapist said that this worked for 10 other families, doesn't mean it would have worked for our family.
100%.
And I
Yep.
didn't get that at the time. I thought, well, the therapist is saying we have to do this. So we better, come on, kids, we're going to, do whatever they say. And I wish that I would have listened to myself a little bit more and been like, no, that's great that this worked for everybody else, but it's not going to work for us. So we need to come up with another plan. And I was too scared
So
to speak up.
right, and because I think there was so much help that was needed. That's sort of like, what's that limit? Like, what's that balance between getting that quote unquote professional help, but yet also doing mom intuition? And hey, if help is being offered, so let me reach out to it. Let me take it all in. And there's also more.
Right.
And that's important. And knowing what that balance is and how to go about it. I think that's something that no matter if your kids are 3, 10, 33, or 50,
Doesn't
it's
matter.
always the balance. And it's always going to be there for us as parents. So I want to go back to what you were saying regarding that self-care and how that's something that, even though it's funny, as a therapist myself, I found those words very cliche, sort of like the and how does it make you feel type words. But at the same time, I look at the words of self-care as a very, very important part of what parents need, and how important that is to what it is that we do in that 7-Eleven style availability and need that we have to be there for our kids. So I'm curious, like, when that, like, light bulb, the way you were saying it, went off, like, oh my gosh, like, what are things that I like doing? Like, what was that like, and how is that something that you, looking at it now, still as a parent of 3 kids, how is that something that you've been incorporating to really assist in the process of being a version of yourself that's a better version for you as a mom?
Well, when I realized I had no answer for that question, it I had never even thought of it before, and it really struck me really hard. And it took several days, and I finally figured out that, you know what, as a parent, we're responsible for filling all of these little love tanks, and that's what you do as a parent, is you want to replenish your child's love tank so they constantly feel full. But what happens to your love tank? If your love tank is
Mm,
not being replenished, how can you keep giving to all these other love tanks? You can't. If yours is never being
right.
filled, it's impossible to keep doing that. And I think that's why I was so on edge when my kids were growing up, and I felt so drained and overwhelmed all the time because I didn't have anybody replenishing my tank. I heard all these things from my mother that I needed to do, but I have never yet once ever heard her say, you're a good mom. I've never heard that. So, and that's a whole other deal. But
Yeah,
when you don't
sounds like it.
hear that, yeah. But when you don't hear that from anybody, you really doubt yourself. So, as I was thinking about this question from this guy, and it was dawning on me that self care, had I practiced some self care as my kids were growing up, I'm not talking about you need to take a week long spa vacation, every year. I'm not talking about,
Even though that would be nice, but yeah.
wouldn't it though? But I couldn't afford it, and I didn't have the time. Who was going to take my 3, I call them children, childebeests, because who was going to take my childebeests while I was gone? No one. No one was signing up for that gig. So
Right.
I didn't have that option. And had I just had 15 minutes a week of doing something special for myself,
Mm,
whether that was a face mask, or I had a nice bar of soap to look forward to, or something
mm,
that was mine that I could, the kids understood that when mom does this, we were alone, the Calgon moment, kind of, you know, and it could have been that I put the face mask on and I still had to run around chasing kids, or I still had to do whatever. At least I was doing something for myself. And I never did that when they were growing up. And I think that's why my company is so important to me now, because I try to
mm.
provide those things for other women and men who feel like they've just been run over by a truck by life, and
Mm.
need something quick and relatively inexpensive to help pick themselves back up and move on. And it sounds so silly, a bar of soap, but it really can make a difference. It really does make a
Oh
big
yeah,
difference.
for sure, for sure. Can you share with us the that website, please?
I can. It's sergeantbubbles.com.
Okay, we will put that in the show notes,
Awesome.
so
It's named
our
after our
listeners
deceased
can.
dog.
Oh, okay. There you
Rebecca
go.
came
I
up with
love
the
it.
name, Sergeant Bubbles.
Okay. So I want to go back to Rebecca for my last question over here as we sort of wind down over here. You talked about the self harm, and that was something that is obviously had a big impact both on you and on the family dynamics, and things starting out with eating disorders as a young teenager. Can you talk a little bit more about that regarding what the role of a parent is when it comes to seeing what your child is going through and the suffering a child is going through internally, and then hearing about the cutting as a parent? What are some things that you can look back at and say, these are some lessons and some advice that I would give to others?
I had no idea that she was cutting for quite a while because she made sure that she wore long sleeves and long pants. And I remember the day that I caught her coming out of the shower with just a towel on. And I thought my heart was going to come out of my body because she was cut from wrist to elbow. She had hundreds of cuts. And I was so upset and didn't know what to show her. I didn't know whether to be angry. I didn't know whether to be concerned. I didn't know what to be. I just knew that this was wrong. And how was I going to get my baby out of this? And I actually had a therapist tell me that that's just the way that teen girls deal with issues these days, that that's just the normal.
Wait a second. So you had someone that had what we were talking about before, those letters
Yes.
before or after their name.
Yes.
And then they're telling you that your daughter cutting herself is normal behavior.
She'll grow out of it. Yeah, that's what I was told. And the problem is,
I have never heard of such a messed up therapist in my life.
That's what the therapist told me.
Wow.
And the problem is Rebecca still cuts to this day. And that was when she was about 13 and she's 23 now. And will still cut when things get out of control for her. It's a horrible thing. And that's one of the things that I'm talking about. When I got that advice, I wanted to throttle the therapist that said that to me because I knew that wasn't the case. And that's where I'm talking about. You have to listen more to yourself because I knew that wasn't right. I knew that it was not okay for her to do that. I knew that I was a former paramedic, and several times I couldn't get the bleeding stopped wherever she would cut, and we'd have to go to the hospital and get her stitched or stapled up. And I knew that was not normal. I knew that a child should not be in that much pain. I knew that that's not how they should express their pain. I knew the whole thing was wrong. And asking Rebecca now, Rebecca tells me that there's not a lot that I could have done, that I would sit and try to talk to her, but that the feelings inside of her would just become so overwhelming. She had to do something to release the pain. But I don't have a good answer at this point what to do. I know that I would sit and try to talk with her. I removed all the razor blades from the house, but kids find ways to get razor blades. They find different things they can cut with. And I removed everything possibly sharp that I could. And that included our kitchen knives. They were locked up for a while. And it is the most heartbreaking thing that you can go through as a parent. And all I can say is to be there for your child, just to be there. It may not solve it. It may not get them the help that they need, but don't ostracize them because of it. Rebecca, we were shopping for wedding dresses not too long ago because Rebecca's engaged, and she has scars. Thank you. She has scars from her shoulders to her toes. And the lady that was helping us with the wedding dress, you could tell she wanted to ask, but didn't know how to ask. And Rebecca was very open and said, I used to cut as a teenager. I'm better now, which she was until an event happened and she went back to cutting, but she hadn't cut in probably 3 or 4 years at this point. And she's not afraid to tell people, this is why I have these scars. I shouldn't have done it, but I didn't know what else to do at the time. But she doesn't even have an answer as to what I could have done to help prevent those scars. So I don't know what the answer is.
Knowing what you know now and hearing the experience from some of your kids, being able to process certain events and situations that have happened over the years, what would you tell a parent of a 13-year-old child that's cutting? Or what would you tell yourself from, about 10 years ago?
To listen to your own intuition, to be there for your child, and let them know that you're always there. Nothing else comes before them. It's if they're having a hard time, you can always come and talk to me. And I think I would just, I know that a lot of girls, when I was in high school, nobody cut. And I know that it is more prevalent now. It is a prevalent way that girls are handling it. But you've got to instill in your kids that that doesn't mean that it's okay. It's not okay. It's never
Right.
okay to hurt yourself. You know, we can
Right.
find other ways to deal with whatever's going on. Just don't hurt
Right.
yourself.
Right. Oh, I hear that, and I think that makes perfect sense for the emotions that are coming up now here in this room, but also, thinking about it from what was happening 10 years ago, and channeling those emotions as well. That's, there's it's very heavy, and it's a lot. And I guess in the way of this podcast, and something that I talk about in my room a lot as a therapist, is, and like we were saying before, is that we don't always like our kids, but we always love them. And we have to channel that to make it that we can hopefully like our kids as much as we love them constantly. And I think that's the message that I'm hearing from you. So it's goes full circle from where we started today, to sort of see the importance of love. And letters before after a name mean nothing when it comes to mom, and it comes to what she's able to give over to her kids, which sounds like you have been and it will continue. And whether it's through this business or through connecting or reconnecting with children that we might not be speaking to right now, but I think something that's constantly there. So that's, for sure something that I've taken out of today. But I'm curious from you, from your point of view, or, for what we've been talking about. And I have, two or three more rapid fire questions for you, but how would you sort of summarize in like a sentence or two what we talked about today, and what you were able to take out, and the message that you would like to give over to others from today?
Well, one thing I want to say really quick is that I've always told my kids that I may not like you, but I will always love you, and that will never change. And I just heard my son tell my grandson that the other day. So he told my grandson, I don't like what you're doing, but I love you. And I thought, I wonder where he's heard that before.
Oh, where did that from? Yeah.
Yeah. But, no one else can take your place. No one, it seems like you're replaced with friends or a favorite teacher or a favorite coach, or no one else will ever take mom or dad's place. And don't underestimate the amount of power that you have in your child's life, because you have a lot of power in their life. And rely on your intuition. And I will tell you that we have gone rounds. My kids and I have, there are things that I could tell you that would knock your socks off, but I like all of them. Now that we've gone through it and they're all adults.
Oh, that's a real blessing that you can still say that now. That's awesome.
I would choose to be friends with any one of my kids, because they turned out to be great people, and they're caring, they're considerate, they're loving, they're kind, they're just wonderful kids. I couldn't ask for more. They're responsible.
Okay, so on that note over here, as we're sort of finishing up, is there an embarrassing or hilarious moment that comes to mind as a parent that happened with one of your kids? You don't have to say which one, but in like a sentence or two, an embarrassing or hilarious moment that you could remember off the top of your head as a parent.
Oh, there's so many. And they're escaping me right now. Probably when my son went to school. I can't believe I'm even going to say this, but my eldest son went to school and took my box of Tampax with him and proceeded to hand them out one by one to the rest of the kids on the playground, because he didn't know what they were. But he thought he would bring everybody gifts. God. So
wow.
So that was one of the things, that the lighter things that my son has done.
I did not see that going there. No. I did not see that going there at all. If you could think of a superpower that you would want to help with everyday mundane tasks as a parent, what would they be?
Oh, invisibility.
Or pick one.
Invisibility. Yes. Can you imagine if you got to go in and see what your kids were doing and they didn't know that you were there? Can you imagine the power that would give you? Oh my gosh, that would be wonderful. You could head off so many problems before they actually happened.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I heard that.
What would you choose?
If there was, so I've gone through so many different scenarios from here, but I think it would be the power of more patience
Oh, that's a good one.
and being able to just be in the moment without getting too emotional in
That's a good
all
one.
my situations that I deal with my kids. So that's probably the one I would choose. And yeah, and I think I'm confident in my answer there.
That's a good
So
answer.
thank you. My last question for you: if there could be someone that you could think of in the past 100 years, non-family member that you would like to have lunch with, who would that be?
Probably someone like Abraham Lincoln, because
Mm.
I would like
Okay,
to
a little
figure.
more than 100 years from now, but
Okay, I guess that
I'll
is
take that
more
as
than
an answer
100
because
years. Go.
I'm a big fan of him and I read up on him a lot. So I'll let you slide that as an answer over here.
Okay,
So
good.
this has been amazing. I learned a lot and I really appreciate it. And hopefully these messages will be resonating by many people. But one more time for us, what is the name of the website?
It's sergeantbubbles.com. And if there's anything that
Okay.
I can, if one of your listeners is going through what I've been through and is really stuck and doesn't know what to do and is just needs a sounding board, I'm more than happy if they contact me because I've been through it. Believe me, I've been through it. I have the t-shirt and I am more than happy to be a sounding. I'm not a therapist, but I'm more than happy to be a sounding board for someone who's going through it and doesn't know what to do.
That's amazing.
They
That's
can
amazing.
contact me
And
through my
I
website.
see your, there is. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. This has been fun.